we are going to be talking about how to grow and leverage your global network, how to unlock the power of LinkedIn to elevate careers. I'm Erica Madison, and it's a pleasure to present this workshop for the 2023 NCDA Global Conference. A question for our participants: how do you tend to use LinkedIn? There are so many different ways that you can use this platform, from increasing visibility to sharing and gaining information to building relationships. It's a way for people to fulfill their needs, to be seen, to learn, and to connect. So I'm curious if you're willing to share in the chat or come off mute. What do you tend to use LinkedIn for?
All of the above. I always say it's a place to see and be seen. So to be able to see who else is out there that might be doing similar things to you, but also collect information about other people and then connect or reconnect with other people. So, you and I know each other as an example, but, to see things that you're doing makes it sort of reconnect some of those networking connections and bonds. I also think it's a great place to do, and I work, helping my clients do some research on either companies or people that are doing different jobs, what they're calling those titles, allowing them to do a little bit of research and background in terms of what they might be looking for. It's helpful on LinkedIn. It's like a huge database.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Kim.
You're welcome.
So lots of different ways that we can be using LinkedIn. Would anybody else like to chime in with any ways that they are using LinkedIn?
I feel like I use LinkedIn in all the ways, but primarily for information gathering, helping students find ways to add companies to their target list or to make some connections at different employers that they're interested in. That's how I'm using it primarily the most right now.
Absolutely. So we can connect with people, we can do research, we can keep on people's radar screens, so many ways to use the platform. So when we think about who's on LinkedIn, something that struck me when I was pulling together some information to share with folks is that while there are many millions of people around the world who have accounts on LinkedIn, the actual number of people who are active on the platform is dramatically smaller, which means that if you are active on the platform, you are part of a relatively small number of people around the globe. If you take a look at this graph, you'll see that the monthly active users is substantially lower than the total number of users, and the daily active users is much less than the amount of monthly active users. So this is something to keep in mind when people are hesitant to be active on the platform. It can be useful to remind them that by doing so, they are part of a relatively small number of people around the world. Of course, it is still, several million people, but the number of people who are active on LinkedIn is far smaller than the number of people who have accounts. This is also important to remember when you do outreach on LinkedIn. If you don't hear back from people, it could be that they're not active on the platform. And so it's important to take a look at their recent activity. And if it says that they haven't posted in the last month, chances are they're not really checking LinkedIn much. And there's probably a better way to reach them, for instance, through email or getting a phone number for them. So this year's NCDA conference was held in Chicago. And on my last visit to Chicago, which was in the fall, I was there during the Chicago Marathon. And being from Boston, of course, marathons are a really big deal. They bring together people from all over the world, all different shapes and sizes and colors and ages and abilities. And it's an amazing experience just to witness. I definitely was not running in the marathon. I was just watching. But I thought back to that visit, and then I thought about this workshop that I was going to be leading at NCDA, and I thought about the connections. I thought about how both a marathon and LinkedIn bring together all these different people from around the world. And they're there for different reasons, but they're all there for some reason. Maybe they have a few reasons. And so this was something that came to mind for me as I was preparing for this visit to Chicago. So I'm curious, what brings you here? What are you hoping to learn or deepen in terms of your engagement or involvement with LinkedIn?
I've been using LinkedIn for a long time, and I've been using it with my clients for a long time. So I honestly, this fit my schedule, and I thought if I could pick up a couple extra tips or pointers, that would be great. I do have some specific questions around things like the difference between connecting and following. I'm curious about how sometimes I get um, newsletters from people that they initiate on LinkedIn. I'm not sure how to do that, but I'm curious for me as a user how to do that. And then any general tips. The other piece that is always a big question mark for my clients is, why do I have to fill out the about section, which I think is a huge value add. And I know there's lots of keywords in there that you can, or lots of places you can add keywords in. I know there are also new things out there that I'm probably not aware of. The last piece, I'm just checking my list here because I made a list when I knew it was coming. The other thing on my list is the way that LinkedIn uses the skills section. I know that there are people, for me in particular, that have endorsed me for skills that don't even know me. And yet I feel like it's still part of the algorithm somewhere that increases your search results. So I'm always curious about how that works. So if you have any insight on that, I think those are my big questions, but I may have some others as I get in there. So thank
Thank
you.
you. What an interesting array of questions. So I think what I would start with is your first one, which was the differentiation between following and connecting. The way that I like to explain that to clients and other folks I'm working with is that following is a great first step. If you look at somebody's profile and you think that they might be putting out content that you would be interested in. So let's say that you're looking to make a career pivot and you want to learn more about what people in your desired industry are posting about. That would be a great step to take with several people who are in your target industry. For instance, maybe you do a search of alums from your alma mater and you use the filtering function and you find 27 people in your area who are alums of your university who work in a certain industry. Maybe you filter it even further. You want to get the list down to sort of a manageable number of people. Whenever somebody does a search and they end up with like 500 results, I say, okay, let's narrow that down so you get to maybe around 100 or 50 people, because that's more manageable and it's going to be more tailored for what you're actually looking for. So with the following, I say that's always a good first step. And then once you start to look at what they're posting about, you start engaging with their content, give them some thumbs up, give them a little comment here or there. Maybe you share some of their posts, things like that. Then you basically started to establish a rapport with them. And so then you might decide, hey, this is somebody I'd really like to build a relationship with. I'm now going to, maybe after a few days or even weeks, send them a personalized invitation to connect. So at that point, it's not like you're doing cold outreach because you've already warmed them up. They already probably have an idea of who you are. You're already on the radar screen because you've been engaging with their content. So that is the strategy that I pretty much always recommend to people. Sure, if you're really in a rush, you might just immediately skip to the step of sending a personalized invitation to connect. I know sometimes when people are job searching, they might feel really desperate and they feel like they need to just do things. And sometimes connecting can feel good because it's like something you can check off a list. However, when it comes to being more intentional and strategic and effective, I believe that taking it a little bit slower, actually thinking of it as a marathon, not a sprint, to go along with my analogy here, is really going to serve people well. So that is the difference and how I recommend using them. You asked a bunch of other great, yes, please.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? So I know that LinkedIn often limits the number of people you can connect with within a certain time frame. I don't know what that is, but could I follow 100 people and not get dinged by LinkedIn to say stop connecting?
I believe there is a limit. I don't know currently what the limit is for following, but you can follow quite a number of people.
Okay.
You know, and it's I'm not sure if it's a daily limit or like a monthly limit, but you can follow quite a number of people. So again, I would still say, you know, be selective. Don't just go out there and like follow every single alum from your university. But once you narrow it down to say, you know, 50 people who you think are sort of relevant for what you're about, what you're interested in, what you're looking to accomplish, how you're looking to contribute, and so forth, then, you know, go ahead and start following those folks, and maybe just do like a few new follows every week, and then make sure that you're on the platform, you're engaging with their content and so forth, and then see from there who you'd like to connect with. So you will probably end up following more people than you connect with. But everybody has to kind of do this in a way that resonates with them, their goals, their personality, and how much time they have to put into this. So I do think the approach needs to be tailored for the individual. And you did raise a bunch of other great questions, Kim, some of which I don't know answers to. I'll be perfectly candid. LinkedIn is always evolving, adding new features and everything like that. But one you did mention was about newsletters. I also know a lot of people who have newsletters on LinkedIn, and it's something that you can create. You can also create articles. So instead of just going to post, you have a number of different options. So pay attention to the different menus and things that are available to you in LinkedIn. Another feature to be aware of is that you can go into creator mode, and that's going to give you more options for creating content. So be aware of that as well.
Thank you.
Anything to add on this slide before we move on?
I think for me, it's just making that pivot of I feel comfortable using LinkedIn as a coach for my students, but then how do I want to use LinkedIn as I start to build a practice?
Absolutely. And so sometimes people will say to me, you know, should I have 2 different LinkedIn profiles? I feel like there are these different parts of my personality or my life or even my work life that need to be represented. How do I go about doing that? So when you're an entrepreneur and you have a 9-to-5, that can be an example of it. So there are different strategies that you can use. I always recommend having one LinkedIn profile. However, you can also create a business page when you are at a point with your practice where it makes sense to do that. And one of the strategies that you can use if you do go that route is you can share posts that you do on your personal page as the business. And so that way you don't have to actually create twice as much content. You can reuse or repurpose existing content. And there are a number of advantages to that. I wouldn't say that every single post you want to have on your business page is something you simply are reusing from your personal page, but it is something that you know, I do with quite a bit of regularity, and nobody has complained so far. So and you know, one thing that you can do by posting on your personal profile is you can get the content in front of a lot of people if you have a lot of people following you and many connections. They say that 500 connections is a good threshold because if you have fewer than 500, you're just really limiting your exposure, your access to information, and so forth. So if you're ever working with a student or a client and they have under 500 connections, you do want to encourage them to grow their network, starting with the people who they actually already know in real life, which is something that we sometimes forget to do. And we think, oh, I have to go out and like connect with all of these strangers, when in fact, you probably already know a lot of people in real life who you like, you have a positive association with, but you just haven't sort of taken that moment to connect with them on LinkedIn if they're on the platform. So by posting things through your personal account where you might have a lot of followers and connections already built up over the years, you're able to get content in front of more people, and then you can slowly start building your audience for your business page as you share content from your personal page to your business page. So that can be sort of a shortcut for building an audience for your business page. So I'm going to share a story with you about when I was on my trip to Chicago. I met somebody on the shuttle going to the airport, and I shared with them where I was going and what I was going to be doing, that I was going to this NCDA conference and I was going to be leading a workshop on LinkedIn. And they said, "Oh, LinkedIn, I have a LinkedIn account, but I never use it." And I have to say, that is something I hear from people all the time. As coaches, you might hear that very often as well. And it always sort of interests me when people say that. And I said, "Oh, well, if you hang out with me for about an hour, you'll probably change what you're saying because you'll probably discover that you might have some reasons that you want to use LinkedIn more." And she said, "Well, all of my students know who I am." She was a professor, and so she was feeling like there really wasn't a reason for her to take time to be active on LinkedIn. And I get it. I said, "Sure, they know who grades them, right? They're paying attention to things like that." But it did make me curious, what are the reasons that people choose not to engage on the platform? And I don't want to diminish these, because there are some very legitimate reasons that people either have concerns about or outright just don't want anything to do with a platform like LinkedIn. So I'm curious, as we think about some of the reasons and barriers that people are not engaging on LinkedIn, what are some of the things that you're aware of?
Reasons why people don't engage?
Yes, why people either don't have a profile at all, or they have one and they never go on LinkedIn.
I think they think about it as, I only need to do this if I'm looking for a job. And if they're not looking for a job, then they don't look at it quite the same way.
I think another
Absolutely.
reason,
Yeah.
I think another reason is folks feeling like that only individuals in a certain industry are active on LinkedIn. That if I'm not, fill in the blank, if I'm not business, if I'm not marketing, if I'm not consulting, then why do I need to be on LinkedIn? They kind of have that misperception.
Sure. So the idea is that LinkedIn is only something to use when I need a new job or I need a job. And also this idea of, well, that's only for people in certain industries. There's really no purpose in me being on there because I'm in such and such industry. Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for sharing those reasons. So I think it's important that we recognize people's thinking around why they are or are not on the platform, so that we can educate and share information, and create space for different ways for people to go about their career development and their career management. That being said, there are a number of benefits to being on LinkedIn and being active. So an example is Shamil, who is somebody who I met through some strategic outreach that I conducted on LinkedIn last year. And Shamil has a learning and development company. He's a small business owner located not too far from me. And I reached out to him with interest in what he was doing based on what I saw on his profile. And we ended up setting up an online meeting. We got to know each other. We talked about our work. And this turned into an ongoing collaboration where Shamil is bringing in trainers to lead workshops for his different clients, which are small to medium companies and nonprofits. And so I've led workshops for him, for his clients, on topics like LinkedIn, communication best practices for teams, and some other topics. And so it's really been a win-win-win situation, because his clients are able to have presenters on topics that are relevant and useful to them. He is able to provide this service and run his business. And I'm benefiting because I'm able to share about topics that I'm passionate about. And I love leading workshops. And I'm a small business owner. So, this is part of my bread and butter. So everybody wins. And the reason that collaboration happened is through outreach on LinkedIn and intentional relationship building. So I didn't just stop at sending an invitation to connect. I didn't just stop at sending a message. I didn't just stop at having an online meeting with him. It was really about persistent follow-up and communication, building trust, getting to know each other, building that relationship over time. And so that's a story that I love to share, because it's really just illustrative of what you can accomplish through LinkedIn if you use certain types of strategies and have a certain mindset about it. So I'm curious from you all, what are some reasons that you are using LinkedIn? You already shared some of them earlier on. I'm curious if you have a short success story or any kind of anecdote about how LinkedIn has changed your life, your business, or has been valuable for people who you are supporting.
I think for me, I don't post as regularly as, well, I don't know. I don't have a regular schedule for posting, but I like to share events that I go to or people that I've met with. I think it's a lot of my business comes through referrals, and this gives me a chance to just be front and center if people happen to be out there looking. So I have clients that I don't know who have found me through LinkedIn, through a post or through a connection somehow. And even the clients that I have had that may not be actively searching anymore, still come out and make a quick comment or something. So I think for me, it's visibility. But I also go out to see what other people are doing, right? So I'm connected with other coaches. I'm connected with my target market. I'm connected with people I used to work with. I'm connected to a lot of people, more than the 500 piece at this point. So I think for me, it's again, I was going to go back, a place to see and be seen, right? It's a place for me to see what people are doing and a place for people to see what I'm up to.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Kim.
You're welcome.
Would
It's
anyone
been,
else like to share?
I think it's been helpful for me just to be able to strategically start to build my brand a bit more. So maybe some of the folks that I work with day in and day out aren't necessarily aware of some of the ways that I'm stretching and growing outside of work, and folks who I collaborate with on different side projects, might not have in-depth information about the traditional work that I do. So I think it's just a way for me to build my brand as someone who can be well-rounded and to share that story with different audiences.
Sure. So keeping in the loop with what people are up to, sharing about what you're working on, being visible. Absolutely. All really great reasons to be using LinkedIn. And so one of the things that I like to encourage people to do when sometimes they feel a little bit unsure of why they would show up on LinkedIn or how they would show up is to come from a place of being of service. And that's because from my work with hundreds of clients over the years, what I've noticed is a tendency for so many people to feel like if they are going to be on a platform like LinkedIn, it is somehow bragging about themselves. It is somehow tooting their own horn in a way that is really, unbecoming. They don't feel comfortable with it in many cases. They're not sure how to go about it, and it's really just unappealing to them. And so one of the things that I work with folks to do is help them think of it instead as coming from a place of service. So thinking about the questions, who are you serving and how are you serving them? I was at this Open Streets event recently in my community where it was the day of streets for people, as I like to call it. So car-free streets. And there were lots of people giving pedicab rides. So people who needed a break or wanted a break from, walking around and what have you, were able to hop in one of these and get, brought around on basically a big tricycle and, have a break. And this kind of got me thinking about this whole notion of being of service, right? Like, who are we there to support, to be there for? Who are we seeking to speak to? Who do we want to receive our message? And what is it that we are seeking to communicate, not only to them, but with them? How are we engaging people in dialogue and making our posts more interactive? There are lots of ways we can do that by posing questions, using features such as polling and tagging people and using hashtags and responding to other people's content, not only, hoping that they will come engage with our content. We can amplify other people by sharing their posts, whether it's a call for volunteers, a job opening, a grant opportunity, so many different things, an upcoming event. But we can help people through our use of LinkedIn day in and day out, and it doesn't even need to take much time at all. Also thinking about our goals. So who is in your network? Who do you want to have in your network? What is your reach like? You can look at your statistics. You can look at, how many impressions, how many reactions, everything like that. You can track the data over time. You can go in and look at your data and see your top performing posts over the last 90 days. There's a lot of information that can be gleaned if you take advantage of it. And your impact. So sometimes this one can be a little hard to figure out, but it's worthwhile to think about what kind of an impact are you seeking to have through your engagement on platforms like LinkedIn, and then tying that back to, okay, so what are you putting out there? Not only what are you posting, but how are you engaging with people? So now we get into some of the mechanics of it. How are you showing up on the platform? Thinking about who are you seeking to attract and what do you want them to know about you? A potential structure that you can use is I do such and such so that such and such. This is from the Notion by Simon Sinek in books like Start with Why, which really gets at your motivation, right? What drives you? And so here are a couple of examples I've pulled from a couple different people's profiles. One of them talks about solving problems with words, content creation and management, communications, marketing strategy. They're using piping, which are the vertical lines, as separators between those different topics, between those different areas of expertise or services. And then you'll notice that they also have hashtags below where they share what they talk about. So these are things that you can choose to have on your profile, what you're talking about, and you get to decide what those are, which is again going to impact who's going to find you and who is going to be exposed to your content. Another example is helping leaders to activate bolder strategy and innovation through the power of people. Clients include Marriott, HP, Cisco, Kellogg's. So this is, I think, another really strong headline because it's giving you a sense of scope, right, of the magnitude of the kinds of clients who this person is serving. And it's really giving you a sense of what this person is about. Who are they working with? They're working with leaders. What are they doing? They're helping these leaders activate bolder strategy and innovation. How are they doing it? Through the power of people. So I love sharing examples like this with my clients because I think that these are really effective ways to communicate what you're about and to get people really interested in learning more. So we're going to take a few minutes toward the end here for some key takeaways and questions. I'm curious, any questions that folks have that are lingering? I may or may not have answers because again, you had some great questions and things are constantly changing with LinkedIn, but throw them out there, and also any key takeaways that anyone would like to share from what we've covered together today so far. Also, any ideas or revelations you have about maybe something that you'd like to do in terms of your use of LinkedIn based on today's conversation. I'd be interested to hear.
I have another question, and maybe either of you can answer this. How do you recommend that your clients be on LinkedIn when they don't want to attract a lot of attention? Like, hey, I'm looking for a job. Do you have ideas for posts that you would recommend that they make? People are always afraid to like be too visible, but I feel like there are opportunities for them to post without feeling like they don't have to scream like I'm looking for a new job, right? And I think it's more, they get more visibility or different visibility if they post than if they just reply on somebody else, or comment on somebody else's post.
Sure. This is a really common concern. I'm glad you brought this up, Kim. So curious to hear also what others think. I'll throw a couple of thoughts out there. One is that this is a great reason to not only wait to use LinkedIn until you're looking for a job. Because if you are regularly using the platform, nobody is really going to know if and when you're keeping an eye out for other opportunities. And some people would argue that it's always good to be keeping an eye out for other opportunities.
Right.
And so if you think of it in that way, then it makes sense to be using the platform regularly instead of, having these spikes every couple years or so. Just kind of thinking of it again as a marathon, like slow and steady, right? And so it needs to be this kind of sustainable level of activity instead of having these huge spikes. Okay. So that's one piece. But sometimes it's kind of that advice is not useful when they are in the throes of, I'm looking for a job and I haven't been active on the platform in years, right? So one of the things that I suggest is that they post about things that are sort of at that intersection of what they're already doing and what they want to be doing. So for instance, if somebody works in the foundation world, but they want to move over to some other type of foundation, how can they focus on things that have to do with philanthropy at large? Because that's where there's crossover between what they are currently doing and what they want to be doing. Or if they're in government and they want to move to a company, but they want to do work on a similar issue area, they could focus on that issue area. So there are a lot of different ways to do this. Those are just a couple of quick examples, but it's really about not just, only posting about things that are like this new industry or this new issue area or this new company, but really finding crossover, overlap types of content that they can be sharing about. So things that are relevant for, their current industry, if that's relevant to what they want to be doing moving forward. Or say they're in project management and they want to stay in project management, but they want to move into a totally different industry, sector, setting, line of products, what have you. They want to stay in project management. They could be posting a lot of things about project management as a discipline, right? So thinking about communities of practice, what kinds of groups on LinkedIn might they join that are really for project managers? And who can they be associating with? What kinds of things can they be posting about? What kinds of publications, podcasts, thought leaders, etc., can they be amplifying who are big in the project management world? So those are a few recommendations I would give. Would anybody like to add to that?
I agree with what you're saying, that there's never a bad time to not be looking or just keeping your options out there. But even if that truly is how someone feels, I think it's great to still take a lot of that advice, Erica, of how can I amplify the voices of my community? So maybe I'm not trying to break into a new industry or a new community, but how can I just show that I'm tuned in, I'm leading I want to stay knowledgeable, I want to be cutting edge. Even if it's within your own current industry, I still think it shows that you are a top performer in your work.
Thank you. We have time for a couple more questions or key takeaways if anyone would like to share further.
Surprise, surprise. I have another question. Can you talk about your perspective of being on LinkedIn Premium versus not needing a premium account?
Absolutely. This is a really common question as well. People are always asking, do I get a paid version of LinkedIn? Now, I will say I don't get any kind of kickback from LinkedIn, so I'm independent in saying my thoughts here. I have had different levels of memberships with LinkedIn. What I will say is that I always recommend that people start with the free version and get really familiar with what they can do for free. And then if they're really taking advantage of all of the different features that are relevant for them that are available on the free type of account, and they want to get a little bit more out of their use of LinkedIn, they want to have, more ability to message people they're not connected with. They want to be able to see who is viewing their profile. They want to, just different access, different abilities. Then it can make sense to do a trial for a paid membership. give that a shot, maybe for a month and see how that is for you. And if you find that you are actually taking advantage of those different features that are available to you, then sure, go ahead and get that for, a year, for instance, and see how that is for you. And if you're using that, you might want, access to LinkedIn Learning. That's something that's extremely, popular these days. And then there are, higher levels of LinkedIn where, you can spend a few $100s a year and you can do lots of things, which can make sense if you're in recruiting, sales, if you're a small business owner, if you're looking to, really substantially grow your network, identify leads, potential clients, what have you. And something to keep in mind is that there are even some other tools that you can connect with, for instance, LinkedIn Navigator, so that you can really amp up what you can do. For instance, if you want to use automation and things like AI to help you with your basically your outreach, then there are things available to you. I signed up for a service last year for a few months as I was growing my business, and it really enabled me to basically, turbocharge what I was doing, because it took out so much of the manual aspect and it automated things. Another thing you can do is you can work with an assistant and you can craft messages, you can provide certain direction, certain lists, and different things like that, and then have them go and send the actual messages on your behalf, logged in as you, and so forth. So there are just so many different ways that you can really leverage the tool, and you can, make best use of your time and resources. So just different things to be considering as you think about what makes sense for you, what your needs and your goals are. So I welcome you to keep in touch. It would be wonderful to keep the dialogue going and continue to share resources with each other. It's been a pleasure engaging with you on this topic. Again, there's so much about LinkedIn that's constantly changing, and so much for us to be learning and sharing about together. So I look forward to keeping the conversation going and seeing you online on sites like LinkedIn. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Erica.